All right, so Kyrsten Sinema remains to be one of the primary blockades to much of Joe Biden's agenda, and as you can see from this Politico article right now, they are trying to basically put forward the For the People Act through the Senate today, and it's obviously not going to pass. Why? Because we have this little thing called the filibuster, and the filibuster makes it so that you need the 60 vote threshold in order to pass a piece of legislation like this, instead of just a 51 vote threshold, which Democrats could use if the filibuster was not something that existed. But because of politicians like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and a few others, we can't get past the filibuster, and they want to instead protect it at the expense of really important legislation like this that is very, very much needed right now at a time where Republicans all across the country are passing extremely restrictive voting rights bills. And so this is needed to combat and push us in the opposite direction of that, obviously. And so Kyrsten Sinema wrote a delusional op-ed justifying her position in protecting the filibuster. And I just wanted to read you some of the quotes from here. There's a good article from Jake Johnson from Common Dreams, but this is just straight up delusional what she has to say here. So let's just break it down piece by piece. So she says, quote, "My support for retaining the 60 vote threshold is not based on the importance of any particular policy. It is based on what is best for our democracy. My support for retaining the 60 vote threshold is not based on the importance of any particular policy." First of all, it really should be. I mean, if you are truly fighting for the agenda that your party says that you believe in, then you would be fighting for specific policy agenda items. I mean, that's why I constantly advocate for things like Medicare for all, free public college, UBI, etc. We can go down the list of all the specific policy agenda items. Those are the types of things that elected officials are supposed to go and fight and advocate for. But then she says, it's based on what is best for our democracy. The filibuster, this is how stupid what she's saying is. The filibuster is the exact opposite of what it means to have a democracy. If in the Senate the filibuster didn't exist, then you would have a majority vote that could succeed on pieces of legislation. It would only take 51 votes, which would be democracy, instead of having 60 out of 100, which is minority rule. That means 41 senators in the Republican minority can block every piece of legislation that comes through the Senate. That is not democracy. That is clearly the opposite definition of democracy. It's so ridiculous that all you have to do is go on Google and look up what the word democracy means, and then you could figure out that this is not only not protecting democracy, but it is in fact impeding democracy directly. But she continues on. The filibuster compels moderation, and helps protect the country from wild swings between opposing policy poles. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Because every time Republicans are in power, they completely ignore all of these rules. They use the process of budget reconciliation to aggressively push their agenda towards the right-wing direction. It's just that whenever Democrats get in power, they're too afraid or incompetent to use these same aggressive strategies to push us back in the leftward direction. So when was the last time that we had a wild swing in the right-wing direction and then a wild swing in the left-wing direction? When? Point to me one single time in history since FDR that we had a wild swing in the left-wing direction. We've just been progressively moving further and further right. So I have no idea what she's even referencing in this point to say that it protects us from wild swings between opposing policy poles. We just keep swinging to the right. This is not something that ever goes back in the opposite direction. This is something that entrenches the power of the minority and therefore, by definition, entrenches the power of the right because they have less power in Congress right now. So again, completely wrong. And also saying the filibuster compels moderation. This is not moderation. The things that are being proposed right now, the For the People Act, that is a moderate bill. That's nothing aggressive or crazy. It's expanding voting rights. That is the moderate position. The non-moderate position, the radical position, is allowing Republicans all across the United States to pass these aggressively restrictive voting bills and then not doing anything about it. That is the radical position. So swinging back in the opposite direction is the moderate position. And yet she completely frames it in an inaccurate way. She continues, "To those who want to eliminate the legislative filibuster to expand healthcare access or retirement benefits, would it be good for our country if we did, only to later see that legislation replaced by legislation dividing Medicaid into block grants, slashing earned Social Security and Medicare benefits, or defunding women's productive health services? Very scary situation. It's almost like it could happen anyways." So they continue on, but as observers readily pointed out, the filibuster does not protect Medicaid and other spending programs, given that they can be gutted through the budget reconciliation process, which is exempt from the filibuster and requires a simple majority vote. And in fact, in 2017, the GOP nearly succeeded in repealing the Affordable Care Act using budget reconciliation, and that same year, Republicans also used a reconciliation bill to target Planned Parenthood. So she sits here and uses this fear tactic of pointing out, oh, well, if we try to pass Medicaid or Planned Parenthood expansion, then Republicans are just going to turn around and attack it. Republicans are going to turn around and attack it even if the filibuster is in place. So that's not an argument in favor of protecting the filibuster. Absolutely ridiculous. So here's what a couple people had to say about it. Representative Mondaire Jones said Monday that Sinema and other filibuster defenders are effectively arguing that, quote, we should let Republicans destroy democracy now because at some indeterminate time in the future, they may try again. So he's exactly right in this framing, right? He basically just saying, yeah, well, if we be too aggressive, this is the same thing that Joe Manchin said in his op-ed that he put out a couple weeks ago, too. He said, well, if we try to be aggressively partisan now, then Republicans are going to turn around and be aggressively partisan in the future. They're already doing this. They are already aggressively partisan. The Republican Party is not going to take your attempts in good faith to work in a bipartisan way and then turn around and repay that good faith. They're going to turn around and shove us in the right direction as aggressively as possible, ignoring all the rules along the way. So that's an accurate characterization there from Mondaire Jones. Even the New York Times columnists are coming out. New York Times columnist Jamel Bouie characterized Sinema's op-ed as unbelievably weak and said its assertions range from being demonstrably false to disingenuous to delusional. So listen, when the New York Times is calling your arguments delusional and disingenuous and demonstrably false, then it's time to pack it up and go home, because the New York Times is not a left-wing publication, okay? They're not a super radical, progressive group that is trying to lobby you to act on behalf of the American people, okay? We know who the New York Times is. They're as establishment as it possibly gets, right? And even they are able to recognize the ridiculous nature of these arguments being put forward by Sinema. So listen, the people who are opposing getting rid of the filibuster have no legitimate arguments. They have no legs to stand on. And we see that from the weak bullshit that they are putting out as an excuse to allow Republicans to attack democracy. And instead of actually responding to that with actual legislation that would benefit and protect democracy, they are choosing to lose the fight.